Hello and welcome to EngLearn. As I promised a few weeks ago, we're going to now look at one of the texts that has appeared in one of the earlier versions of the exam, and we're going to use it to analyze form, structure, and language. Now, for those of you who have been following the channel, that you know that I have recently published 3 videos that focus on the elements of form, structure, and language that you can use to analyze form, structure, and language in any given text. Now, if you haven't seen those videos, I'm going to put a card here in the upper right corner so you can go there and watch them. And you can also download the free handouts that I've made that are going to help you identify elements of form, structure, and language in any text that you get in the exam or in your classes. Now, we're going to use those elements to try to analyze the language of this text in this video today, and then in the next video we're going to focus on structure, and finally we're going to focus on form, and then we're going to take all the things that we've done and we're going to put them together into a commentary. So we have a lot of work to do. If you want to make sure that you don't miss any future videos, click the subscribe button, share this video with your friends, or if you're a teacher, with other students and with other teachers, and let's get going. So we're looking at a text that was written by Queen Marie of Romania in 1923, and in this text she describes the changes that her country has undergone in the previous few years. So let's read. I look back and see visions of my country as for 23 years I have known it. Peaceful, blooming, full of abundance, its vast plain an ocean of waving corn amongst which diligent peasants move to and fro, gathering in the harvest, the land's dearest pride. I see its humble villages hidden among fruit trees. I see the autumn splendor of its forests. I see the grand solitude of its mountain summits. I see its noble convents, corners of hidden beauty, treasures of ancient art. I hear the sound of the shepherd's horn, the sweet complaint of his ditties. So let's look at these first 2 paragraphs and try to analyze the language. Now, the simplest thing that we can do, that is definitely not enough for any higher grades, but let's start with that, is that we're going to notice that a lot of the words that appear in these first 2 paragraphs are words with very positive connotations. So we have words like peaceful, blooming, abundance, diligent, peasants, the land's dearest pride, humble villages, splendor, grand solitude, noble convents, hidden beauty, treasures, the sweet complaint. So in and of itself, just recognizing that these words have positive connotations doesn't really mean a lot, but what does mean, what can give you some points for analysis, is the fact that you can notice that these words all belong to the lexical or semantic field of peace, and abundance. So there is a sense of peace and abundance as you read this. Now, why is this important? Well, it's really important because this lexical field then influences the tone of this entire section. And then we need to think about, okay, what is that tone like? So she keeps mentioning that she is looking back. So when you are looking back at something, and you're thinking of that with some kind of a positive emotion, we can talk about a feeling that is called nostalgia. So the tone is definitely absolutely nostalgic. But even more than that, she is not presenting her country very realistically, if we're going to be maybe cynical a little bit here. She's giving these idealistic characteristics to her country. So we could say that her country is presented in an idyllic way. So even to the extent that this seems like something that is mythical, this is not a real country, it's like a mythical fairy tale country. Now, why does she give us this presentation of her country? Well, if you read the rest of the text, which I hope you have, I have posted it on my channel, you're going to see that things change dramatically later on as war comes. So the reason why she gives us this introduction where she paints this beautiful picture of her country is because this section creates emotional investment. We become emotionally invested in this beautiful country that she describes, and we're going to see this beautiful picture completely shattered by the war later on. Now, this emotional investment is created by this idea of identity of the country, collective identity. There is a kind of sentimental attachment to her country that she describes in these few paragraphs, these two and the following two. So we're going to focus also on the idea that she says constantly, I see, I see, I see, I hear. So all of these are elements of imagery. She's going to offer us different types of imagery, both visual imagery and auditory imagery. And the purpose of that imagery is to establish nostalgia. Bear with me and my laptop. So it establishes nostalgia and this emotional investment that we mentioned. Okay. Now, let's read the next two and then we're going to analyze this entire section together. I see long roads with clouds of dust rising from them, many carts in a file. I see gaily clad peasants flocking to market. I see naked plains and long stretches of sand by the sea. I also see our broad, proud river Danube rolling its many waters past quaint little villages and boroughs inhabited by motley crowds of different nationalities, past towns of which the rising industries are a promise of future wealth. I see our port of Constanza with its bustle, its noise, and its hopes. So, one of the things that is emphasized in this paragraph that I've just read are all of these movements and this bustle and this energy that is felt, unlike the previous two, which were very nostalgic and kind of slow and focused on this piece. These two paragraphs are very much focused on movement and on energy. So where do we see that movement and energy? Well, we see that there are clouds of dust rising from carts. There are people who are flocking to the market. Remember when we analyzed that handout I gave you and it said that you need to look at the verbs and whether those verbs are mostly active or mostly passive? Sorry. Well, if people are flocking to market, they're definitely very active. She looks at the river Danube. The river Danube is again rolling its waters. And even the people are so many different peoples. They're motley crowds. And there are crowds, not just a few people. And there is the list of three, its bustle, its noise, and its hopes. So there is this list of three that establishes again this auditory imagery that is very active, very energetic. So there is a sense of, throughout these two paragraphs, there is a sense of movements and energy. And what these movement and energy imply is the idea that there is a lot of potential in this land. Potential not only in the fact that there are industries that are a promise of future wealth, and also this beautiful metaphor up here, but she says, it's vast plain, an ocean of waving corn. Now, why is this related to this down here? Well, let's think about this metaphor. So she says that the plains of the country, the fields that they have, are an ocean of waving corn. So they're endless, they're huge, they're gigantic, they're vast. And that also implies that there is a lot of fertility in this land. The land is very fertile. It has a lot to give. And people are gathering in the harvest, which also implies this fertility and this abundance. So both the land and the people have a lot of potential, and there is so much this country could do if left in peace. Another thing I want us to look at here is how she constantly repeats again this idea of I see, and she mentions so many things. I mean, these are just a few sentences, but she has enumerated. There is this constant enumeration where she's just putting one thing after another, which again points to that abundance. There are so many things that are beautiful here. Not just one or two things, but so many things. Look at how many I've managed to enumerate in just a few paragraphs. There is also this sense of collective identity. There is our Danube, our port of Constanza. And if you're going to think about the sentence structures throughout these first two paragraphs, they are very consistent with what we talked about when we analyze sentence structures in our handouts. So these are long descriptive sentences which are used to slow down the pace, and they're used to give these really beautiful descriptions and to help us kind of savor the beauty of the country and to really slow down and look at this and think about it. And then I'm going to mark this in red because it's really, really that important. We come to this critical key sentence down here, and it's a single sentence paragraph, which obviously means it's so super important. So this single sentence paragraph says, then on August 27th, 1916, the call to arms, war. So we have a single sentence paragraph, which obviously, certainly, definitely marks a huge shift. Just the idea that it's kind of isolated from the rest of the text. But then also we have the content of the sentence itself. We have this very specific date that she gives. And if you think about it, this kind of factual, documentary nature of this date, very specific, is in such stark contrast with these idyllic pictures that she's been, oh my god, what is opera doing on my, yeah, okay. So she gives this very specific date, which is factual, and the reason for that is really to kind of shock us from this beautiful description that she had up there, but it also establishes credibility. She is giving an eyewitness account to what happened, and she has very specific data to back it up. Then we have the call to arms, war. So then on August 27, 1916, the call to arms, war. So one thing that you can also notice about this entire sentence, first of all, of course, it's much shorter than the previous sentences, but also it's what we call a minor sentence, because it doesn't have a verb. So you need to wonder, okay, why, after all these long sentences, now the author gives us a sentence that doesn't even have a verb. So the thing here is, of course, for dramatic effect, because the event that is happening, this war, is so overwhelming that it can't even be expressed in a normal sentence. The sentence has to be something that is abnormal, that there is something wrong with it. And then you also can pay attention to the punctuation here. There is a dash, and after that there is just a single word, and it ends in an exclamation point, which again further emphasizes this dramatic impact, the shock that is happening due to this overwhelming event. The word war, as the word death later on, if you're going to notice later on, is capitalized here. So when something is capitalized, it is given importance, obviously. It's almost like a proper noun. So the war itself is personified in a sense, and it's presented as a threatening force that is coming to destroy everything that was established in these first two sections. Okay, let's move on. And let's read the following paragraph. I see the ardent faces of my young soldiers going off gaily into battle. I see the trains leaving, the flowers that decorate the cannons, horses and men. I hear the tramping of passing regiments, shouts of enthusiasm, words of exultation. So let's look at the words here. So they are preparing to go to war, but let's see what their mood as they're going to war is. So we have the idea that the soldiers have ardent faces and they're going off gaily or happily to battle. There are flowers that decorate the cannons. We're gonna mark this here and then discuss that later. I hear the tramping. Again, we have this movement of passing regiments. We have the auditory imagery, shouts of enthusiasm, words of exaltation. That is also a list of 3, the tramping, shouts, and words. And we have these words, enthusiasm and exaltation. So it's clear in this short paragraph that unlike the previous single sentence paragraph, the tone here is very enthusiastic. They're excited to be going to battle. They're hoping to fight for their country. They're very patriotic. And they're really, if you look at this particular expression here, flowers that decorate the cannons. So if we think about the connotations of the word flowers, something that is lively, that gives life, that is living, and then cannons, who will be mentioned in connotation of death many, many times later on in the text, we can see that juxtaposition there. They have decorated their cannons that are going to bring destruction with flowers. And this juxtaposition suggests a kind of irony of life and death. And it also shows how naive they are in thinking that this is something where they're going to be the winners. They're going to do it easily. And it's something that kind of happens a lot with young people as they perceive war, they glorify it. But there is nothing to glorify, as we will see in the following paragraphs. So she says, I see the first one, she continues and she says, I see the first wounded in the hospitals of Bucharest, white beds, many faces all turned toward me, eager hands helping. I inspect everything, go everywhere. I have my own hospital in our palace. I too am full of hope. So unlike this previous paragraph where she described what the other people were doing, what the soldiers were doing, and what they were up to as they were going into battle, in this part here, she gives us a very personal account. So we see that through the mentioning of the word I see, all the faces are turned towards me, I inspect everything, I have my own hospital. So this section is more personal. Now, why is this section important? We're going to talk about this when we talk about form, but she is not just an observer of what is happening. She is the queen. So the things that happen to her personally and the things that happen to her state are very closely intertwined. So this paragraph actually serves as a kind of proof as evidence of what is happening. She is the eyewitness of everything that is going on with her country, but at the same time, it also helps establish her credibility as a leader. She is there with her people. She hasn't left them. She is there with them in all of these terrifying situations that are happening. For a while, a very short while, the news received from our armies is good, awakes wild enthusiasm, awakes dreams of glory in many a breast. Then the first ill tidings, a shadow on the expectant faces, a shadow over the town in spite of the blue sky above. Now this paragraph is a perfect paragraph of the idea that within just one paragraph, within 2 sentences that are admittedly very long, you can have a strong shift in tone. So first she speaks about how the news are good and it awakens wild enthusiasm and dreams of glory. And then she switches, and as she announced, it's very short while. So they have ill tidings and they have a shadow over the expectant faces and a shadow over the entire town, which is in spite of the blue sky above. So you have so many contrasts here. The contrast between this short time that they expected something positive to happen, and then the fact that they're getting first bad news that they're going to continue for much longer. And then you have this, they were expectant faces, they were hoping for something, and then there was a shadow cast over them. And also the first introduction of this weather metaphor that she's going to use very extensively later on. So she's clearly moving towards all the negative things that are going to happen, and it's happening gradually. The tone is shifting gradually. After that, there are still days of hope and confidence, see? So still positive connotations. Days when the first illusions seem to take form once more. But through it all, I have the strange presentiment that my country will have to drink to the dregs the bitterest of cups. So see how this sentence, again, it's a very long single sentence paragraph, but the sentence itself moves from moves through different tones. So there is hope and confidence, but then she realizes these are all illusions. She tells us, we understand, okay, these are illusions, we were naive. And then she uses this word presentiment. I have this strange presentiment, which creates tension and gets us to anticipate something negative happening. And finally, she has a strange presentiment that her country will have to drink to the dregs the bitterest of cups, which is clearly a metaphor which indicates that suffering is absolutely inevitable and they're going to suffer greatly. Airships and zeppelins become haunting dread by day and by night and by day. Our country being narrow, the ground is good for such cruel sport. Death is poured down from the skies into the streets. Women and children are slaughtered without number. And as though in defiance of the laws of God, the days they choose for their death raids are the days when heaven is bluest and then the sun shines most brightly. So if we're going to color our text and take a look at the changes that happen, clearly here we have loads of negative connotations. So they are a haunting dread, cruel sport, death is poured down, women and children are slaughtered, and there are death raids. And if you remember what we talked about, how war was personified and capitalized, here we have death, which is personified, which makes it so much more terrifying. It is pouring down from the skies as like rain. And we have again this weather metaphor combined with contrast, which indicates that there's a strong contrast between their hopes and their expectations and what is really happening. Now, for the first time here, we have this mention of the laws of God. So she's slowly introducing religious lexical field, and we're going to see that further on as well. But let's just mention it here and we'll discuss why later on. Okay. Having been designed by the enemy as principal culprits, it is the house out of town where I live with my children that they single out for special punishment. And on a glorious autumn day morning, they throw 72 bombs upon the dwelling where it is known that my little ones are usually to be found. But on that day, God did not wish another crime to be added to their lists. Ever darker are the clouds gathering around our heads. With anxiety, we look for the help that was promised us. Surely this small country has to learn its lesson and be laid low in the dust. And as in the time of the great flood, our small, struggling country is threatened from all sides at once. So in this part, we have two interesting things, let's say. So first of all, she mentions again the number of bombs that have been thrown on their house. And again, that serves the purpose of it being very credible, showing that she's an eyewitness, that she's witnessing a historical event, and she wants to record these precise details for the future so people know what happened. And then she adds, again, but on that day, God did not wish another crime to be added to their list. So we have that religious lexical field, and then we think about why she introduces it like that. And one of the possible reasons could be that she's trying to establish that the stakes are even higher here. This is no longer just a battle between countries, it is a battle between good and evil. Again, the weather metaphor, and lots of negative connotations here. And also, again, as in the time of the Great Flood, she is comparing her difficulty with these biblical references. She continues and says, our frontiers are endless. Without reinforcements, our resources are too small. We begin to realize the inevitable results if help doesn't come soon enough. So again, a very short and impactful sentence combined with a hyperbole here, which together or have the purpose of establishing a tone of absolute despair. They don't know what they're going to do. They understand that there is nothing to be done and that they need urgent help from someone. And then we have a paragraph that starts with but, and here you can see a single word can signify some kind of a change and some kind of a shift. And she says, but my cup is not yet full. Amidst all the turmoil and growing anxiety, my youngest child sickens, and all our efforts cannot save his life. During 3 mortal weeks we struggle to keep him, but death rules supreme over the world. It is not to be. So this but serves to move or shift the tone to a more personal one. So she is, again, no longer just the queen of her people, but she is an individual who is suffering greatly during this war and also has this personal battle that she has to suffer through. Absolutely, because the topic is so devastating. There is a lot of very, very negative connotations here. Again, death being personified, as we already mentioned, death rules supreme over the world. And she finishes with a single impactful sentence, it is not to be. It feels very final. It feels very heavy. It leaves you to ponder over what she means by this. And then in her next paragraph, she clarifies. On All Souls Day, my last born, my little Marcia, passes away, and the voice of the cannon sounds closer every day. Again, a single sentence paragraph. And again, a very important section of the text, so we're going to mark it with red here. Now, this can be seen as the climax of the text, really. The first sentence with the announcement of war was clearly a shift into a definitely more a negative tone, but this here is the climax where everything simply collapses. So her child passes away. On a personal level, her world is completely shattered. But also on the collective level of her country and her position as the queen, the voice of the cannon sounds closer every day. Everything is absolutely falling apart. We also have the imagery that is going to be used many times again later on as well, where she uses this auditory imagery to represent death and destruction. After that, for a while, all becomes dark. I grope about as one who has lost her way. Only one thing remains to me, the intense desire to alleviate suffering around me, to go there where despair is greatest, to drown my own grief in the grief of others, to move in places where my own tears can be shed without shame. So this part really has a very, very grim tone, a tone of absolute grief on her part, and which is then mixed again, personal and collective and personal are again being mixed. She drowns her own sorrow by alleviating the suffering of those people around her. And we can also, if you remember when you talked about structure, and we're going to talk about this again when we discuss the structure, if you remember, we should always see if the beginning and the end are somehow connected. And here she speaks about how everything becomes dark and she gropes about in the dark like someone who has lost her way. So unlike the first paragraphs when she talks about everything that she sees, here we have a sense of disorientation and lack of direction. She doesn't know where she is. She doesn't know what to do. She's absolutely lost. So I begin wondering about all the parts of the country that have remained to us. On all sides I hear the dreaded voice of the cannon calling out its message of death and destruction. Again, this repeated imagery where cannons signify death, with some alliteration as well. I penetrate as far as they will allow me to go. I hunt up those freshly brought in from battle. As in a ghastly dream, I move from bed to bed. We have this simile here that shows that she has such a deep level of trauma that she doesn't even distinguish. The line between the nightmares and the reality are so blurred, and there is absolute chaos just simply descending upon her. So now we've analyzed the language. We're going to analyze form and structure in our future videos, so please subscribe to get access to those. And if you have any questions, or if there was something that you didn't understand on your own and maybe you understood it as you watched this video, or if there's anything that was really interesting to you, please comment below. I read all the comments and I'm going to try to respond to those that I can, and I'll see you in the next video. Happy exam season, everyone!